Hello everyone, so today we're going to do a video analysis on the movie that recently came out, Joker. And now this analysis might be special because I'm a schizophrenic. So this video is going to be a Joker analysis from a schizophrenic's point of view. This was a video recommendation from a fellow schizophrenic, and I thought I'd go ahead and dive into my analysis of the movie, just having seen it once. But I felt, man, it was such a good movie for a number of reasons. But, what a lot of people like to talk about is that the Joker is identifiable for everyone. He feels outcast from society. He feels separate from society. He feels like society is bearing down upon him, and that's making him feel more and more uncomfortable, leading to insanity. Now, the Joker, I wouldn't describe him as just a schizophrenic like I am. I describe him as a delusional schizophrenic. He has these really vivid and vital delusions that he plays through where he thinks that they're real. And he's an extreme version of a schizophrenic, very extreme version. What makes him identifiable for most people is that he does feel separate from society, like he was outcast, as many other YouTubers have talked about. But I think that people focus on that too much. I think that everybody tries to see themselves in the Joker, which is a good thing, but they don't really understand the mental illness that he's going through. They just try to focus on him feeling like he's outcast from society, which I think most people do, even the people who really aren't. We like to think that we're not in the majority, that everybody around us is, or not everybody, but most people around us are just different and they can't understand us. But really, we just can't understand ourselves most of the time. I mean, we can, but we don't try too hard enough. But the Joker, he tries to put himself in a context where he really needs society to accept him in the form of being a comedian. He really tries to write down the right jokes, do enough research in order to produce a comedy act. And he ties himself to the approval of others to such an extent that madness for somebody like him almost was inevitable. Especially when his role model, the late night talk show host, really tore him down in a video, which would be kind of career suicide for a talk show host, not to mention. But, not the actual suicide, but career suicide, because you don't do that on a talk show. But he gets angry at that. His idol, his father figure, if you will, tears him down. And then that brings him to the point where he's like, I'm going to kill myself to show that everything that you do is ridiculous. So he ties himself and what he's going to do as far as killing himself into this narrative of, oh, my life was a joke to you. Let's see how it plays when I kill myself. Let's see if you get the joke. Of course, he ends up killing the late night talk show host, but his original plan was to kill himself. Now, throughout the movie, we see him use his senses in a very strange way, but a way that I understand. So he's constantly stroking things, and he gets the feeling of everything around him, and he's constantly stroking things and running his hand along things to experience the feeling of things. Now, schizophrenics, a lot of time, we are very sensitive. We are very sensitive to all of our senses are 2 to 3 times more intense than an average person's senses. My own included. If I didn't take medication, I'd be 2 or 3 times more sensitive to everything around me. I'd smell more. I'd see more vividly. Everything is very bright. Everything is very loud. I pick up on the slightest hints of textural differentiation when I'm running my hand along something. Without medication, all my senses are just so intense, and we see that sensitivity in Arthur. We see him constantly running his hand along things and experiencing things to such an extent that he can make a whole reality unto itself just from something he wants to see happen in his own life. Now, the dangerous side of the Joker, the more unfortunate side, is that, when he has this relationship with this woman in his apartment complex, or lack thereof, from the moment that they had that brief connection where they had these finger guns to their heads, he felt like there was a connection there, and then he kind of ran with it. In his own life, he imagined her being there, whether consciously or unconsciously, we're actually not sure, which these are two very different things. He imagined her being there at his his first stand-up night, stand-up comedy, at the restaurant, when he was seeing his mother and she was there to support him. He imagined her in all these different roles. But what makes me think that he imagined that but knew that it didn't actually happen is that when he showed up in her apartment that one night, and she freaked out, he didn't seem to question, like, oh, why are you freaking out? He knew. He was imagining these things. Because of our extrasensory data, how much data we take in, when we imagine something, we can truly imagine it as schizophrenics. And of course, his social problems, his social issues. That's a big thing for most schizophrenics, myself included. It took me a long time to develop any level of social skills. And for Arthur, he never really seemed to develop any, even though he's older than me. But he also seems to have a very more intense version of schizophrenia. And there are many different levels of schizophrenia. But it really shatters his world when he finds out that what his mother did to him and what Thomas Wayne, I think, his supposed father, before he realizes the truth, his reaction to Arthur, it really destroyed him. And a lot of these instances where it seems like he's being emotionally destroyed, he just breaks out in intense and uncontrollable laughter, which is very sad. Because I'm not familiar with the disorder that makes you spontaneously laugh. This might be kind of a hint that I don't usually prepare for videos very much. I just kind of speak what I think. If you haven't noticed that by now, that's kind of what I do in my videos. I don't prepare very much. I just speak from the heart. I got a few notes written on here, but it's not really anything. When he realizes what his mother did and his father did, or his adopted father did, it really gutted him, destroyed him. And he tried to see how Batman, future Batman, Bruce Wayne, he wanted to have that connection to him because he felt like it was his half-brother. And maybe it really is, we're not really sure. But he wanted to have that connection to him. And I think that if Joker would have had as much support as Bruce Wayne did, even when his parents died, he could have ended up something like Batman. We see this dualistic, this polar opposite kind of tango going on between them, that they're really not that much different. It's just that Arthur got a bad hand. Now, I can't stress enough that when you rely on other people in society to give you the validation you need as a person in order for you to live, that will lead to terrible consequences for your psychology. Even if it works out, you're still very reliant. And then when something happens where that reliance is threatened, where you feel like that connection to society is severed, you lose your mind. We see it in celebrities and people who have gone viral so many times that once they started getting all this backlash to something they said or did, then they just completely break down because part of their identity was receiving that validation. So if Arthur was my friend, if he was somebody that I knew was having trouble, and somebody that was willing to talk to me, I'd say, look, man, you just have to step away from being reliant upon others to validate yourself as an individual. You may have gone through all of this trauma, all of this pain, but it need not define you. You can be something else besides all the pain that society has brought forth within you. I wouldn't tell him it's his fault, because mostly it's not, even if he did make some very bad choices. I tell him, look, you just have to step back. You have to find your own footing and not become the person that your mother wanted you to become. Not the kind of person that you've always seen yourself as being, but somebody who is self-sufficient, self-validating. This is an advantage to me being a spiritual person. I identify with the metaphysical, so I don't require validation from people on this earth. I don't require validation from society. but it took me a while to get there. And there's a lot of times in my life, especially my teen years, well, only my teen years, where I could have become somebody like Arthur because I didn't have a path, I didn't have a purpose. And Arthur finds a purpose, unfortunately, that is incredibly negative. I would like to say that, just like Arthur, I was in a mental asylum. Well, mental hospital, psych ward. I think the most common term now is psych ward, but a lot of people know it as a mental hospital. I wasn't especially violent. I was just on like level 1, which is the level where people can play nice with each other. The higher you go, the more insane people get. As far as in the building, the higher you go. I remember one person being escorted to chow line. I call it chow line like it's jail, but I mean, I guess it kind of fits. Anyway, escorted to chow line with a guard, like making sure he didn't do anything, and he was shaking, and he was grinning that huge grin that I don't really want to do, but he was shaking and grinning, and he was just looking at all the food, and I was behind him. This is me like 16, 17, maybe 18, but I'm pretty sure it was about 16, 17, but I don't have the dates exactly right in my head because that was like crazy years for me. Those were crazy years. But I just remember looking at him and being like, nope, and I moved down, and I gave him a lot of space because I did not want to be anywhere near this person that, just imagine Arthur grinning and shaking. This is what this guy looked like. And he was much older than me, probably 15 or more years older than me. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to move down and give him space. Also, if you're in a psych ward and you also had chemical problems, addictions, the place I was in was just a mixture of rehab and psych ward. It was just a really weird mixture. People couldn't even get to the right places. We were all just in this place, and we all had to figure out how to work it out. They will come in the middle of the night and take your blood. There will be a camera in every room for the place I was in anyway. I'm not going to say which place it was or if most mental hospitals are like this. If you are even in your shower, which is threadbare, you don't have amenities, for more than like 20 minutes, the doctor will come with like a couple guards and knock on the door and see if you're okay and demand that you get out pretty soon. It's not a place that is conducive to healing. So, in the Batman trilogy, well, in the Batman lore in general, Arkham Asylum doesn't seem like a place where anybody heals. It's just where you're kept. In superhero, I guess, lore, we get this feedback that, there are good people and bad people, and the people that are in the asylum are not good, they're just bad. Nobody's just there because they're crazy, they're also bad. They're also evil somehow. Which is not the case for, people in general, but also schizophrenics. Very few schizophrenics are actually violent. I wasn't especially violent. I picked fights with guys that are older and bigger than me sometimes, but I wouldn't say that I was any more violent than your average, teen that was looking to prove himself, but I was obsessed with validation as well, so that's why I picked these fights. And I think that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the end here. When Arthur's across the table with that psychiatrist in this mental asylum, he has white clothes on. He starts laughing, and I think she says, "What's so funny?" He's like, "You wouldn't get it." And that's before it's implied that he killed her or harmed her in some way. But he could have imagined the whole thing. He could have. But I don't think he did. I think that he imagined only the parts with his girlfriend. Or his girlfriend. And I think that he imagined maybe when he was standing on top of the car, but I don't think he imagined that either. I think that was when he truly realized how he could be validated as a person, was being this agent of chaos. And that there would be people to follow him because they also felt like they were pushed out of society, on the fringe of society, just like he was. I think that was real. I could be wrong, but I think it was real. As schizophrenics, we're not displayed in the media or on film in good ways. You'll rarely find a movie where it has a schizophrenic that is portrayed as just being troubled and not being violent. And the few times you do see one, they're just completely off. They're very intensely schizophrenic. They're not a minor schizophrenic at all. You know, I use these terms, but I just know from schizophrenia and dealing with psychiatrists and psychologists that just some basic details. I have not done my research. This is only me from my experiences. This is how I supposedly know these things, but if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, but also be very careful, because if you're not schizophrenic, you can't tell me what schizophrenia is like, not really. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong in analyzing the Joker. I see this dichotomy of a lot of people that are analyzing the movie saying, why critics hate the Joker, why the woke movement hates the Joker, and then that's kind of on the right, and I see way more of that. And on the left, you might see, okay, well, you're glorifying people like this. You're giving them a voice. These are far ranging. I think most of us are actually in between, but I think everybody misses the point. This whole movie is about mental illness and the pain that this man goes through, and people try to use it for their own political agenda, whether it be right or left. And it's kind of gross. It's gross. That aside, when it comes to his disorder, where he laughs uncontrollably, and he does it when he's incredibly sad or depressed. I've had instances where I break down mentally in a similar way, but I don't laugh. But I just get really intense. I just get really, really intense. My eyes go wide and I start smiling. But this is many years back, because it is the anger and the sadness that combines to make that moment so intense. When you have all of this intense emotion, it's not being medicated, you're not dealing with it, and you become an intense person. This is the kind of person that Arthur was, an intense person that was not getting any help from anybody. And this is what can happen if somebody doesn't get help. So the wider context of this is to raise mental health awareness. I mean, maybe that's not even why they made the movie. But I think that it can be used that way. I think it's the best way to use this movie is to raise mental health awareness and how this happens. The kind of people that we push aside, the kind of people that we need to support, so that this kind of person just doesn't have the conditions to exist. So he becomes a better person, a more self-fulfilled person. That is what we should be focusing on. Not if, whether you're from the right or the left in politics, what it represents. It certainly doesn't represent incel people to me. It doesn't represent, but it also doesn't represent, a threat or a glorification of an outcast either. I think that both sides of that are really missing the point. At any rate, I hope that my feedback was conducive to something that you would like to think about. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot them down in the comment section below on YouTube. I'd greatly appreciate them, and I will try to respond to as many as I can. At any rate, I hope that you really think about this movie, try to understand yourselves, and have a great day.